In the quiet town of Coppell, Pennsylvania, nestled among the rolling hills and dense woods, there were whispers of a haunting presence that prowled the darkened streets. The townsfolk spoke in hushed tones about Charlie without a face, or the Green Man, a spectral figure that seemed to emerge from the shadows on the darkest nights. It all began with the story of Raymond Robinson, a boy born in 1910 with a thirst for adventure. One fateful day, at the tender age of 8, young Raymond climbed a bridge to peer into a bird's nest. Unbeknownst to him, danger lurked in the form of high-voltage power lines. As he reached out, a jolt of electricity surged through his body, leaving him terribly disfigured and forever altered. Years passed, and Raymond became a recluse, venturing out only under the cover of night to avoid the horrified stares and whispers of the townspeople. They would catch glimpses of him wandering the streets, his disfigured face illuminated by the eerie glow of a lantern he carried. His skin, a sickly shade of green from the electric burns, gave him an otherworldly appearance. Despite his tragic past, Raymond was not a ghost. He was a man who had survived unimaginable pain and isolation, yet the legend of Charlie without a face took on a life of its own. Over time, his nightly walks became a part of Coppell's folklore, with each generation adding their own embellishments to the tale. One misty autumn night, a group of teenagers decided to test their courage by seeking out the Green Man. They armed themselves with flashlights and bravado, setting off into the woods where Raymond was rumored to roam. As they walked deeper into the forest, the air grew colder, and an unnatural silence enveloped them. Suddenly, a faint, greenish glow appeared in the distance. The group hesitated, their bravado fading into a tense fear. They whispered amongst themselves, debating whether to proceed or turn back. Curiosity won out, and they pressed on, drawn to the ghostly light like moths to a flame. As they approached, the figure of a man emerged from the shadows, his face obscured by the lantern's glow. The teenagers froze, their hearts pounding in their chests. The figure paused, sensing their presence, and slowly turned towards them. And then, with a chilling realization, they saw him, the disfigured face, the greenish hue, the hollow eyes that seemed to bore into their souls. The legend of the Green Man was no longer just a story, it was standing before them, all too real. What happened next? Well, that is a tale for another night, when the moon is high and the shadows deepen. But one thing is certain, those who venture into the woods of Coppell with thoughts of meeting Charlie without a face should beware. For sometimes, the line between legend and reality is far thinner than we dared to imagine. The figure's lantern flickered, casting eerie shadows on the trees around them. The teenagers, their breaths shallow and eyes wide with fear, stood rooted to the spot. The air seemed to thrum with an electric tension, a palpable sense of dread. One of the boys, Michael, took a tentative step forward, his flashlight trembling in his hand. Are you Raymond Robinson?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. The figure didn't respond. Instead, he slowly raised the lantern higher, revealing more of his disfigured face. The scars, twisted and grotesque, told a silent tale of pain and resilience. His eyes, though damaged, held a strange, sorrowful depth. For a moment, time seemed to stand still as the teenagers stared at him, caught between horror and pity. Then, as if deciding they were no threat, the figure turned and began to walk away, his steps slow and deliberate. Michael, emboldened by curiosity, gestured for his friends to follow. They exchanged nervous glances but eventually fell into step behind him, keeping a cautious distance. The path they walked was one seldom trodden, overgrown with weeds and shrouded in darkness. The only light came from the greenish glow of the lantern, casting an unearthly pallor on everything it touched. The silence was broken only by the soft rustling of leaves and the occasional distant hoot of an owl. Minutes stretched into what felt like hours as they trailed the enigmatic figure deeper into the forest. The trees loomed taller, their branches intertwining overhead to form a canopy that blocked out the moonlight. The teenagers began to feel a creeping sense of unease, as if they were being watched by unseen eyes. Finally, they reached a small clearing. In the center stood an old, decrepit cabin, its wooden walls sagging with age. The figure stopped and turned to face them once more, his expression unreadable. He raised a hand, motioning for them to stay where they were before disappearing into the cabin. The teenagers huddled together, their fear mounting. "What do we do?" whispered Jenny, her voice trembling. "We wait," Michael replied, trying to sound braver than he felt. "We came this far. We need to know." The minutes ticked by, each one more agonizing than the last. Just as they were about to turn back, the door to the cabin creaked open, and the figure emerged, holding something in his hand. He approached them slowly, and as he drew nearer, they saw it was an old, weathered photograph. He handed the photograph to Michael, who took it with shaking hands. The image depicted a young boy smiling brightly, his face unscarred and full of life. On the back, written in faded ink, were the words, "Raymond, 1918. Tears welled up in Michael's eyes as he looked up at the figure. "I'm sorry," he said, his voice choked with emotion. "We didn't know." The figure nodded slowly, as if acknowledging their apology. Then, with a final, lingering glance, he turned and walked back into the cabin, closing the door behind him. The teenagers stood in stunned silence, the photograph clutched tightly in Michael's hand. They had come seeking a ghost story, but what they found was something far more haunting, a reminder of the human tragedy that lay at the heart of the legend. As they made their way back through the forest, the lantern's glow faded behind them, leaving them alone in the dark. They walked in silence, each lost in their thoughts. The encounter had changed them, and they knew the story they would tell would be different from the one they had heard. But as they neared the edge of the forest, Michael felt a strange compulsion to look back one last time. He turned, his eyes searching the darkness, and for a fleeting moment, he thought he saw the faintest glimmer of green light in the distance. Was it the green man watching them, or just a trick of the light? The question lingered in his mind, an unsolved mystery that would haunt him for years to come. And with that, the story of Raymond Robinson, Charlie Without a Face, continued to live on, a tale woven from equal parts fear and compassion, destined to be retold for generations. And as for what lay inside the old cabin, what secrets it held and why Raymond chose to share his photograph with them, those were questions that would have to wait for another night. When the shadows grew long and the whispers of the past came alive once more, the next day, the group of friends met at Michael's house. The photograph they had taken from Raymond's cabin lay on the table between them, an unspoken bond drawing them together in shared curiosity and fear. "We need to go back," Michael said, his voice steady but urgent. "There's more to this story, more than we saw last night." Jenny looked apprehensive. "Are you sure that's a good idea? What if he doesn't want us there?" "But he showed us the photograph," said David, another member of their group. "Maybe he wants us to understand something, to know more about him." Reluctantly, they all agreed. The mystery gnawed at them, and they couldn't leave it unresolved. That night, armed with flashlights and newfound determination, they retraced their steps to the forest's edge. The journey seemed shorter this time, their fear tempered by purpose. The forest, however, seemed even darker, the shadows deeper and more menacing. When they reached the clearing, the cabin loomed before them, an ominous silhouette against the night sky. The door creaked open before they could knock, and Raymond stood in the doorway, the lantern's green glow casting eerie shadows on his scarred face. He stepped aside, motioning for them to enter. Inside, the cabin was a stark contrast to its exterior. It was neat and orderly, with simple furnishings and a few personal items that hinted at a lifelong past. Raymond pointed to a small wooden chest in the corner and gestured for them to open it. Michael approached the chest, his heart pounding. He lifted the lid to reveal a collection of old photographs, letters, and newspaper clippings. The photos depicted a young Raymond with his family, smiling and full of life. The letters were written in a neat, flowing script, detailing the everyday events of his early life and the struggles after his accident. One newspaper clipping caught their attention. It was dated June 1918, just a few weeks after Raymond's accident. The headline read, "Local boy severely injured in tragic accident." The article described the incident in detail and mentioned a mysterious benefactor who had paid for Raymond's medical expenses and continued to support him financially. Who was this benefactor? Jenny asked aloud, looking at Raymond. Raymond didn't speak. but he pointed to another letter in the chest. Michael picked it up and read it aloud. It was a thank you note from Raymond's mother to someone named Charles W. Green. The letter expressed deep gratitude for his kindness and generosity. Charles W. Green, David muttered. The Green Man. It wasn't just about his appearance. It was his name. The realization hit them all at once. The legend of the Green Man was not just about Raymond's disfigurement but also about the man who had helped him, a man whose name had been forgotten but whose kindness had lived on in the form of a myth. Raymond handed them another photograph. It showed a middle-aged man standing beside a much younger Raymond, both of them smiling. On the back, it was inscribed, "To my dear friend Charles, with eternal gratitude. Raymond, 1930. Tears filled Jenny's eyes as she looked at Raymond. You want us to tell your story, don't you? The real story. Raymond nodded slowly. He pointed to a final item in the chest, a small, leather-bound diary. Michael opened it and began to read aloud the first entry. It was dated January 1925 and described Raymond's thoughts and feelings in the years following his accident, his struggles, and his moments of hope, many of which were tied to his mysterious benefactor. The friends spent hours in the cabin, reading through the diary, piecing together the true story of Raymond Robinson and Charles W. Green. They learned about Raymond's resilience, his loneliness, and the unexpected friendship that had changed his life. As dawn approached, they knew it was time to leave. Raymond watched them go, his expression one of quiet satisfaction. He had shared his story, and now it was their turn to keep his memory alive. Back in town, the friends gathered at Michael's house once more. They decided to write down everything they had learned and share it with the community. The legend of Charlie without a face would no longer be a tale of fear and misunderstanding. Instead, it would be a story of resilience, kindness, and the enduring power of friendship. And yet, even as they prepared to reveal the truth, they couldn't shake the feeling that their journey was far from over. There were still questions left unanswered, secrets hidden in the depths of the forest, and the enigmatic figure of Raymond Robinson watching over them, a silent guardian of a story that would continue to unfold. As they drifted off to sleep, one thought lingered in their minds. What other mysteries lay hidden in the shadows of Koppel, waiting to be discovered? And who else might be wandering those darkened streets, a living legend with a story to tell? The next few weeks were a whirlwind of activity. The friends worked tirelessly to compile their findings into a coherent narrative. They met with local historians, visited the library for additional research, and even interviewed the oldest residents of Koppel to gather more pieces of the puzzle. One evening, as they were putting the final touches on their presentation, Michael received a mysterious letter. The envelope was old and yellowed, the ink on the address smudged and barely legible. Inside was a single sheet of paper with a simple message: "Meet me at the cabin tonight. There is more you need to know." The letter was unsigned, but Michael knew it had to be from Raymond. He gathered his friends, and together they set off for the forest once more, their curiosity piqued and their nerves on edge. When they arrived at the clearing, they found the cabin door ajar and the lantern's greenish glow spilling out into the night. They entered cautiously, calling out for Raymond, but there was no response. The cabin was empty. On the table, where the chest of photographs had been, lay a small, intricately carved wooden box. Next to it was a note in Raymond's familiar handwriting, "For your eyes only." Michael opened the box to find a stack of letters tied together with a frayed ribbon. These letters were different from the ones they had found before. They were written by Charles W. Green, and they told a story of a secret friendship that spanned decades, a bond that had been forged in the aftermath of Raymond's accident and had endured through countless trials. The letters revealed that Charles had not only been a benefactor, but also a mentor and confidant. He had guided Raymond through the darkest times, helping him find strength and purpose. But there was something more, a hidden truth that had never been revealed. One letter, dated shortly before Charles' death, contained a cryptic message: "Raymond, you must never forget that the true power lies in the green light. It is the key to our connection and the source of all that we have achieved. Guard it well, for it holds the secrets of our past and the future of our legacy." As Michael read the letter aloud, the room seemed to pulse with an otherworldly energy. The lantern's glow intensified, casting long, eerie shadows on the walls. Suddenly, the cabin was filled with a blinding green light, and the friends shielded their eyes. When the light dimmed, they found themselves standing in a different place. The cabin was gone, replaced by a sprawling underground chamber filled with ancient artifacts and glowing crystals. At the center of the chamber stood a pedestal, and on it rested a large, emerald-like gem pulsating with a soft, green light. Raymond appeared beside them, looking younger and healthier than they had ever seen him. His disfigured face was restored, and his eyes shone with a knowing wisdom. "Welcome," he said, his voice echoing in the chamber. "You have discovered the heart of the Green Man's legacy." He explained that the green light was a powerful, mystical force that had been passed down through generations. It had the power to heal, to reveal hidden truths, and to connect people across time and space. Charles had discovered its secrets and had used it to help Raymond, creating the legend that had both protected and obscured its true nature. "But why us?" Jenny asked, her voice trembling. "Because you believed," Raymond replied. "You sought the truth and found it. Now, the legacy of the Green Man is yours to protect and to use wisely." With that, Raymond handed the gem to Michael. As soon as it touched his hands, a rush of knowledge and power surged through him. He saw visions of the past, present, and future, understanding the profound responsibility that had been entrusted to them. The chamber began to fade, and they found themselves back in the cabin, the wooden box still on the table, but the letters gone. The gem, however, remained, glowing softly in Michael's hand. As they left the forest that night, they knew their lives had been irrevocably changed. They had uncovered a legacy that was far more than a local legend. It was a testament to the power of friendship, resilience, and the mysterious green light that bound them together. Years later, as the friends grew older, they used the power of the green light to help those in need, keeping the secrets of the Green Man alive and protecting the legacy that had been entrusted to them. And in the quiet town of Koppel, the legend of Charlie without a face continued to evolve, a story of hope and mystery that would never be forgotten.